Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Committee of the Whole meeting of Fernie City Council held at 6 p.m. on July 18, 2023. We acknowledge that the city of Fernie is located within Kukanamakas, the unceded traditional territory of Yakutat and Nucleate. We recognize that we live and work within their vast lands. Akanahunik are from Yakutat and Nucleate and are members of the Tana-speaking peoples of British Columbia, Idaho, and Montana. I'll call this meeting to order. This meeting is being conducted by in-person electronic means in accordance with Council Procedure Bylaw number 2446. And I'll ask for a mover and a seconder for the following: that if the communication link to the specified place for this meeting is interrupted and cannot be restored within 15 minutes, the meeting shall adjourn and reconvene to the soonest possible time that quorum can be achieved and public notice requirements met. Mover, Councillor Nixon, seconded by Councillor Hamilton. Any discussion? All in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you. I'll now ask for a mover and a seconder for the approval of the agenda and any late items. Councillor Audia Kelly moves. Councillor Hamilton seconds. Any discussion? All in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you. I now ask for a mover and a seconder for the adoption of the minutes of the Committee of the Whole meeting held on June 20th, 2023. Councillor Hamilton, Councillor McIsaac, any discussion? All in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you. I'll now invite the public in attendance or participating electronically who wish to comment on items listed on the meeting agenda in accordance with section 3.7.3 of the procedure bylaw to address council, except speakers must not address council regarding a matter for which a public hearing must be held or has been held pursuant to the Local Government Act prior to council's consideration of the matter or adoption of the bylaw. Speakers must not address council regarding a permit for which public notice must be given or has been given pursuant to the Local Government Act prior to council's consideration of issuance of the permit. Any speaker may only address council for a maximum of 3 minutes. And so I will ask Ms. Rhodes if there's anyone either online or at the specified places indicated a desire to speak.
No, Your Worship, not this evening.
Thank you, Ms. Rhodes. With that, we will move on to item 7.1, Montane Development Application DCC Memo, a report from our Director of Engineering and Public Works, and I understand he is joined by Nancy Henderson of Urban Systems.
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Council. This evening we chose to bring the author of the memo requested by staff forward tonight to provide a brief overview, and then more importantly, an opportunity for questions for council should they have any. So I'll pass it off to Nancy. She's the Senior Local Government Advisor, Nancy Henderson from Urban Systems, and I think she might be getting passed over. There she is.
Welcome, Nancy.
Yeah, good evening, Mayor and Council. I just became a presenter, so I'm just going to set up my PowerPoint here for you as well. Just 1 second. All right. All right. Can you guys see my screen okay? Okay. I'm assuming you can because I haven't heard any responses, but thank you for having me. I'm Nancy Henderson, as noted, from Urban Systems, and I've been asked to provide some advice regarding a request from Pearstone Developments, and as attached to your report is a memo that we prepared. But I'll take you through a presentation as well as just some background information regarding development cost charges and other financial tools, because it has been a while since the City of Fernie did complete a DCC update. So this council may not have contemplated the development cost charges bylaw too much in the past. So I will provide an overview there, and then happy to take any questions that you have. So just to reiterate, the request that staff received from Pearstone was essentially to revise the DCC project list that's included in the 2015 DCC bylaw to include the Southeast Reservoir. The DCC bylaw also be amended to direct the water portion of the DCCs in the Montane development to fund the reservoir. So those would be funds that already are in place, as well as consideration of increasing the municipal assist factor for water systems in the water DCC, which I'll get into in details exactly what that is and how that works. And that the finance department and engineering department be directed to explore funding strategies to advance the construction of the Southeast Reservoir. And in my presentation, we'll provide like some of the options that the city could consider and some of the advantages and disadvantages of those. So I'll take you through just some general development finance considerations that, councils, it can be quite a complex consideration, and a lot of it depends on the philosophy of council and how you see development and see funding development. So just kind of provide some context to that, as well as go through the DCC background and best practices, some other tools that could be considered, and then review the recommendation and then hand it over to council for any questions that you might have. So when considering, how to finance development or fund these infrastructure projects, we really like to just have council really kind of step back from the project itself and think about growth in general and who should pay for it. And that depends on council and on the community and how communities are growing and the development pressures that you have. But, there's many communities in the province that just believe that growth should pay for growth. If growth isn't paying for growth, essentially, the taxpayer becomes involved in subsidizing future growth. And then sometimes that might make sense, but something to keep in the back of your mind, and that really just like the values of the community and the taxpayer. And if they do want to fund growth, what type of growth are they willing to fund? Like maybe affordable housing or attainable housing, but maybe not like resort development. Or some communities are interested in funding like industrial development because of job creation considerations. And then can you attribute all the costs to the developer or the applicant? And sometimes you have projects that there is benefit to the community that could be funded partially when you're considering these projects. But that being said, it's also fair to have the attitude, like if you're going to grow, there should be benefits to the community just as a result of growth. So it really depends on the philosophy of the community and also how clear it is as to who the benefiter is. Generally, across the province, though, taxpayers aren't super keen on subsidizing new development. Some of that might be changing if it was, say, affordable housing or non-market housing because of the housing crisis that we're in. But in general, there's a feeling that taxpayers like, growth to pay for growth. Development finance is quite a complex area of local government administration. And part of the answer to that, or the reason for that, is because the answer to how to best finance development, my response would always be, it depends. It depends on the situation, on the community, your finances, your ability to borrow, that types of things, and your willingness to do so. And then, all areas of local government services are affected by growth. So like in this, we're really zeroing in on some water infrastructure, but, there's other impacts of growth that is funded through the community, whether that be fire service, community centers that aren't necessarily captured in the development approval process. And it also is keeping in mind the operation and maintenance cost over the lifetime of the infrastructure. So operation and maintenance can be a lot more cost effective in sort of downtown concentrated denser development versus sort of single family or low density development. But things to keep in mind is some people call it the gift that keeps on giving when you come to infrastructure and having to pay for it over time. So one of the questions of the developer was, can you just add this project to the DCC program? And, I think it's really important to note that it's not just about adding one project. If you're going to do that, that constitutes a comprehensive DCC review. You can look at your existing program and you can do a minor amendment but that can only be increasing the project costs. And quite honestly, since you guys haven't updated your DCCs since 2015, I can guarantee you the costs of those projects have probably gone up somewhere around 60% or so. So then you'd also be looking at adding new projects onto that list. And when you do that, you're going to have to comprehensively look at every project that could be added to that list. You wouldn't want to do a comprehensive DCC review just to include one project. So, basically you also have to ask yourself in terms of adding this to the program, it is a 12 to 24 month project. And then other questions too, like, is this a good DCC project? What impact does the project have on DCCs? And we'll talk about this in a little bit more detail as we go through. And then are there other more appropriate development finance tools than just adding this to the DCC program? So what are DCCs? And like in the simplest sense, it's a means of pulling funds from a number of developers to pay for offsite capital costs, which benefit them all. So one of the things as we go through, we'll talk about like what good DCC projects are. And I mean, generally they're planned well in advance. They're not required immediately. They're only required if growth proceeds. They're not required if there is no growth. They primarily benefit new development, although they can have a shared benefit allocation to existing developers development as well, or existing community members. They generally have a benefit across the city. It is possible to have area specific DCCs. I would say generally area specific DCCs take place in larger centers where you have large areas, like the city of Kelowna, for example, has area specific DCCs. Penticton used to, where they had sort of downtown and then a sort of suburban area. They've amalgamated them into one. Generally, I would say that communities the size of Fernie typically don't have area specific DCCs, and it really reduces, you have to see a lot of development in that area to make sense of it. So good other things to think about is in terms of projects that don't qualify as DCC projects. So sort of poor examples is when they're required immediately. They're required to rectify existing deficiencies. They're really meant to be for growth. And if it only benefits a small area. So in this particular case, the fact that the Southeast Reservoir is primarily benefiting one landowner and one developer makes it challenging. And I think when you're looking at projects that benefit across a number of developers, they're happy to share and pool those funds and share the costs. But if I was a developer, potentially in this case, in other areas of Fernie, and my DCC program was going up from 1.9 million to 18 million, it's going to have a significant increase in water DCCs that the other developers are essentially now paying into. So, and that's why I think adding this to the DCC program considers, a fulsome review and deliberations. DCCs are a great tool. I highly recommend that municipalities that are facing a fair bit of growth incorporate them. It's really important to update them regularly and do comprehensive reviews regularly. And also, even once you do that, then to do minor reviews that you're reflecting construction costs in this rapidly changing environment. It's also a best practice even to adjust them annually for inflation, which is actually quite a simple undertaking. And when you're in the inflationary environments that we've been in, that just becomes more and more important. If you don't update them regularly, I think as an example, even from the 2015 bylaw to 2023, you often shock the development community because the increase is so high in the tens of percents. So the costs are going to go up. So it's really good to do them regularly, and it's always easier to do them when the market is is strong as well, versus doing them in a downturn when you're increasing costs. It's always a harder discussion. Yeah, and then if you don't have DCC programs and you're requiring infrastructure, like quite often you're stalling development because you're spending all this time trying to figure out what's required and how to fund it. So it is a really good tool, but there are limitations. And I'm sure council's like pretty aware, but DCCs can pay for infrastructure right now, including transportation, including your active transportation network, water, sanitary, storm, parks, trails, and limited park development, which is essentially, parking, fences, and grass. It's quite interesting in the interpretation of the parks. Like if you had an artificial turf field, that all of a sudden becomes a amenity and it's no longer fundable through DCCs. The province is currently reviewing DCC legislation right now and is expected to potentially make some changes to broaden the scope of what DCCs can pay for. So stay tuned on that. I think it's really important, that the principles are followed in terms of the best practices, that they're integrated programs, the benefiter pays, that they're fair and equitable. The development community tends to participate, especially in the larger centers, and like scrutinize the programs. They need to be transparent. They do provide a lot of certainty to the development community. So they can really enhance development in a community when it's providing that clarity the development community is looking for. In terms of just sort of setting the stage as to what this looks like, is you basically determine in each of those categories of DCCs what the total program costs would be. So you basically say in a 10 or 20 year period, most DCC programs are 20 years, some are 10. What do you anticipate to grow? What the projects are needed to support that growth? Sometimes because DCCs, if that list is really long, it might, roads, for example, and municipality might focus only on arterial roads, even though like collector roads are going to be needed. But then maybe collector road contributions are negotiated through zoning, for example. So they are a technical exercise, but there is a bit of a political lens and sort of a test of reasonableness to the cost of the program. Then you essentially figure out, who's benefiting. So if some of the projects are benefiting the existing development or the taxpayer, if you will, then you would create those percentages. And then you would subtract the municipal assist. So basically the standard municipal assists and the most common municipal assist factor is 1%. And the municipal assist factor is where council really would come in. So if there is a certain type of, like sometimes it's just transportation, as you see, we really want to improve our transportation network. We want to see development. The municipality is prepared to support transportation by 25%, or parks is another one that some municipalities will bump that up because they see the value to the existing tax base. But generally, I'd say most municipal assists across the province are 1%. Some of them might go up to 25%, but more commonly not. And then that equals your DCC recoverable cost. So as mentioned, the benefit allocation is just figuring out who benefits. Is it the existing development or new? And then the assist factor, again, is like a council decision. And that has to be, the assist factor must be the same across all projects in a DCC category. So I think when you're reflecting on Parastone's request, you can't just assist Parastone's project by 50% or 25%. It has to be all water projects, but you can have different assist factors across the categories. So parks can be different than water, for example. So when you go through this 12 to 24 month process, you basically have to do like growth projections, figure out where you're going to grow, what the capital costs are. Most municipalities are sort of updating their infrastructure master plans to inform the comprehensive DCC review. It's not always necessary, but it's certainly recommended that they're up to date. Then you determine the who's benefiting, determine, we generally are going to council a couple times, providing background reports, getting a feel on the assist factor, and then from there, the DCC rates get calculated. So, when amending the DCC project list to include the Southeast Reservoir to consider this request, again, it needs to be done as a major DCC update, which is probably something that council should be considering in the near future. It can take 12 to 24 months. 12 is pretty ambitious, and obviously it could take a lot longer than that to start if your infrastructure master plans aren't where they need to be. The minor process isn't an option because you can't change the projects, and you'd have to, when you're doing this, you'd weigh out all of the infrastructure priorities that the city has. And then after you go through this review, the subject project might not even make it onto the list. So, I mean, it would be plausible to say for the city to say is we'll do a comprehensive review, but it just needs to be clear that in the end of the day, this project might not make it onto the list. So that's just something for council to consider. And then it goes onto the list, but the city doesn't have the DCC funds. Like your water DCC fund is not very high. My understanding is the projects that are currently on, the 3 projects that are currently on your 2015 water program, the total project cost at the time, I believe, was 1.9 million. So even if you'd fully grown as you've anticipated in this period, I mean, the maximum you'd have in that account was 1.9 million. I don't recall exactly how much is in there, but I think it's a far cry from the estimated cost of 16 million for this reservoir. So you wouldn't have the money to fund it, and the developer, if they wanted to proceed quickly, they would essentially have to front end the reservoir project anyway, because they're essentially advancing history. So it doesn't necessarily help at the end of the day if they will plan on moving forward quite quickly. So when I talk about front ending, and in the memo, we talk about front ending agreements, just right off the bat, front ending agreements are fairly common in larger cities. Smaller cities tend not to enter into them as much. They are quite an administrative burden for municipalities, and that's something that should be considered. But essentially what happens is the developer pays for the project, but then the local government would collect those DCCs as they're being paid in that development area. So it only could be the water DCC in this case, if we're talking about the reservoir, would collect those as they can't come in and then give them to the developer that paid for that project. In this particular case, the project lands, and I don't have all the details, but if Pearstone was to be the developer for all the projects, they're essentially front ending it and then collecting the DCCs from themselves anyway. So I'm not really sure that it's really much of a benefit to them in the end, if they plan on subdividing and constructing all the phases anyway. So in the memo, we also talk about some other development finance tools, which development cost charges are only a part of them. So we talk a little bit about local service area charges. We talk about development agreements and phase development agreements as well, and development works agreements. So I'm going to go into those just to provide some additional considerations for council. I think when you're considering these other tools, it's also really important to think about, short and long-term borrowing limitations that the municipality does have. So in some of these tools that we're talking about, such as local area service, the municipality is essentially like front ending it. You would still have to finance the cost of it. So that impacts your borrowing capacity as a city. So if you have other projects that you're thinking of borrowing for, that's going to provide a limitation to them. There's short-term boring, which is another option, but you're very limited because of the population in Fernie. So when you're going into longer-term boring, you're also going to need a loan authorization bylaw, and then looking at potentially like electors assent or counter petition type options. So something important to have in the back in your mind. So local area services are something that can be utilized. In this case, they tend to be local in nature, so they tend to be an improvement to an area that's maybe on septic right now, and they want sewer service. So basically, it's front-ended by the municipality and then recovered through taxation by the benefiting area only. It can be a property value tax or a parcel tax or a combination. And again, it's also by bylaw, and it has to be approved by the electors as well. So I'm not sure that the local area service is really a solution for this particular situation. Another option is the developer works agreement, which is quite a similar tool. It's also required to be done by bylaw, and it does need the benefiting parties, at least the majority of the benefiting parties, to approve. They can work really well if you had a project like this that was benefiting, let's say 3, 4, 5 other developers, because essentially one is front-ending it, and the other ones that benefit would pay them back when they develop, and it doesn't expire like a latecomer agreement. So again, like if there is multiple developers in this area, it could be a tool that would provide that developer some confidence to front end, knowing that eventually they could get that money back if development was going to occur, and it was planned. As much as this tool could work, I gotta say it's not often used. And what's used more is just the straight development agreement or phase development agreement in this case. And that's really what our recommendation is too, where these agreements are negotiated as a condition of zoning. Traditionally, over the last several decades, just the straight development agreement that's secured on title as a Section 219 covenant is negotiated at time of zoning, essentially as a condition. Depending on what the needs are, and the sort of scale of the development, they could be very simple, just being like 1 or 2 pieces of infrastructure that's required, to more complex, to include multiple negotiated factors, from parks to roads to different types of infrastructure. Typically in a case like this, there'd be a no build or scorched earth provision, so that they would be secured on the lands by covenant as a condition of zoning, but the property wouldn't be able to be subdivided until the infrastructure was put in place. It's a much simpler option than the phase development agreement that came into place, the case about 20 years ago now, which was basically a reaction of the provincial government due to some case law that was occurring. The phase development agreement is quite similar, but it does require a bylaw and public hearing. The thing that can be quite nice about phase development agreements is, depending on the type of infrastructure that's being required as a condition of zoning, it can be phased over time based on different trigger points. So in this case, if the Southeast Reservoir wasn't required until after 500 lots because there is existing capacity, you could basically phase it so that there'd be a trigger point after 500 lots, the reservoir would have to be built. In this case, my understanding is that the reservoir is essentially needed right away. So the city might be interested just to have more of a simple development agreement just under the broad terms of the community charter. The phase development agreement basically secures the zoning for 10 years. It could be extended to 20 years with the approval of the inspector of municipalities. So essentially, there was just some case law where there was a zoning approved with an amenity tied to it, and then a future council then downzoned after the amenity was constructed. So this was sort of a reaction to that based on lobbying by the development community to the province. However, they are kind of not used as frequently as one might think, because it's simpler for both the developer and the municipality just to do a standard development agreement. So with that, the recommendation that we provided in the memo is essentially the city doesn't have a DCC, comprehensive DCC review on the books. And, you know, even if you did or do plan to add that in to your 5-year capital plan, they do take some time, and they also may not result in this project being included in the program. So it would be a risk for the applicant to wait. And then, you know, because of the immediate need of the Southeast Reservoir to facilitate this development, and the fact that there's just, you know, it's not a DCC project currently, and there isn't much reserve fund, you know, we really recommend that it just be a condition of development approval. And we do recommend, you know, that if the city did provide zoning approval as a condition, at least the developer would have that zoning in place and be able to probably obtain financing much more easier than if they didn't have that zoning in place. And yeah, that's our conclusion and the recommendation, and just be happy to answer any questions that council may have.
Thank you, Ms. Henderson. That's very comprehensive. I appreciate that. And I will open it up to council for questions.
We might want to check to make sure the microphone's working properly. I'm getting it all good.
Can you hear us okay, Ms. Henderson, just to be sure? Yeah, she can. Any questions?
I'll start us off today.
Okay, Councillor Hamilton.
My first question not being an engineer or planner or anything, how big is this proposed reservoir? And the logic or the thought process behind it is, would this reservoir be large enough to support the entire community in the event of some sort of catastrophe to our water supply? You know, it might only be a day or two, but it would be enough to help bridge some sort of emergent need.
Yeah, through mayor to council, I don't think we have the size, like, we're not there yet. We just have the, you know, stepping back high cost, 16 million.
Okay.
Good, because thank you for the question, Councillor Hamilton, because I had a similar question in terms of freshwater, drinking water security. We're experiencing issues both with Ferry Creek supply in terms of turbidity and some impact from the Elk River to our James White wells. Is there an advantage to have additional storage somewhere?
Yeah, I think we don't really have any hard numbers on what excess storage it would provide for the community as a whole.
Okay, thank you.
To the best of my recollection.
Councillor Schuzman.
I had more or less the same question, but I had another one. Further developments down that way past the current development that's going possibly ahead, is that, will this be able to service those as well?
My understanding is that chunk of land is city limits. Is that correct, Eric?
Which chunk of land are you?
The Pearstone chunk is the furthest south to the city boundary all the way around.
Correct.
Although if we were to expand that way, this would be able to
Potentially.
yeah. Okay.
Mr. Barnos.
Thank you, Your Worship. If I could, we do acknowledge there is potentially some benefit to the broader community of having additional reservoir redundancy. We also have to acknowledge that another reservoir, a number of lift stations, more kilometers of pipe come with tremendous operating maintenance, life cycle costs. But we're not stating that there would be no benefit to the broader community, simply that it is currently being triggered as a requirement because of one individual development project.
Yeah, this is anecdotal, of course, but the only adjacent development that I can see benefiting from it is still just notional, and that would be the original lands, I think. that is so notional that can't see that being a trigger of anything at this juncture.
Yeah, that's a large engineering question about high and low pressure and moving it from
And
the
location,
south side to the
yeah,
north side.
yeah, and the creek is in between for sure. Councilor Isaac, and then Councilor Ronda.
Thank you, Worship. Several questions, but I'm going to start off with this one, moving away from the technical aspects. Ms. Henderson's presentation, she had an interesting statement where she said that doing a minor update to the DCC process does not allow the city to add new projects. I'm just wondering who's allowing? Does this actually fall under the Local Government Act for what we're permitted to add to the DCC plan or not? Is it under the LGA? Because I didn't see that. But.
Can you speak to that, Ms. Henderson?
Yes, that would be in accordance with legislation, and you also do need ministry approval. So I think that's quite clearly laid out in their best practices guide would be the best place to provide that or find that information, but happy to share it in more detail if required.
Thank you.
Councilor Ronda.
Thank you, Worship. Just excellent presentation, excellent memo, really thoughtfully written and in-depth as well. I just have one question to the staff here. Why did the request come from Montana?
Through Mayor and Council. The request came because they are starting to phase above their pressure boundary in their existing development. And they're starting to require more infrastructure to support developing higher elevations. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it was there in the memo as well, I understand, but that's the only reason why this has come?
Yeah, they're cresting that hill of needing more elevation.
Okay.
I just wanted to touch on
Yeah,
quickly if I could, I know the last slide was a recommendation, but tonight's the presentation and the memo, it's all for information.
Yeah.
At a later date, we had internally basically talked about maybe early September, we'll be coming forward at a regular meeting for request for a decision. But I need to confirm that with corporate admin and then see if the dates we have in our head will work with the schedules.
Thank you, Mr. Isaac. Councilor Nixon.
Thank you, Mayor Milligan. I'm just curious, maybe I missed it, but have we seen a master plan for the Montaigne area? I mean, I keep on seeing like little glimpses of the portrait, and I haven't seen the master plan. Like campgrounds and group hubs and this big reservoir and a whole bunch of other stuff. I mean, before $60 million seems to be quite a big chunk of change, and it would be nice to see what type of development they want to put in there as well. So I'm just curious.
Good. Your worship, through to Councilor Nixon, I can comment on that. I believe with the previous council, when a rezoning application came forward, it was discussed in the council meeting that that would sort of be, not the end of the road as far as piecemeal applications go, but that staff and council would like to see that sort of overall plan for Montaigne in order to move forward, working together with Montaigne to make sure that there's an overall plan that looked at different housing range, housing spectrum, multifamily, single family, all those sorts of housing types. We did receive an application, I want to say late 2022, and reviewed that application. Didn't think that it was at the point where we could move forward with any sort of recommendation for approval to council, so we communicated back with the applicant. And since we communicated back, we haven't received anything new from them. So it is there, but we haven't really received anything of real material to move forward to council.
Yeah, and thank you. Sorry, Councilor Artie Kelly, I had a similar question. Seeing the full build out to understand, even given Ms. Henderson's potential financing models, without a full build out and understanding the range of what we were discussing here, it's very difficult to suggest $60 million is a significant price tag. Councilor Artie Kelly.
Through your worship, through to staff, I'm just wondering about plans and where it's fitting into our work plan to look at major updates to our development cost file.
I think I might have to pass that.
I can, if I can, Mayor and Council, our Director of Finance has scoping it out on his work plan for the coming months. I believe by the end of the year, he should be advancing the scope of work for the update, what other departments will be involved, and then bringing something forward for the coming year. That's my understanding of his list of priorities, is that a DCC update remains on his list of priorities. He requires some work on the scope of the project.
Thank you.
Just another follow-up.
Further? Yeah.
Would we tie it in at all with OCP?
Your worship, I would say in council, I would say they need to be coordinated with your official or informed through your official community plan. Ms. Jansen, do you have any comments on that?
Sure. Your worship, the council, within the OCP, we would be looking at future growth and therefore looking at our infrastructure models, which we've just built in 2020. So we're in a good position, at least for water and sanitary and roads for those. But we would be looking at those growth models and informing decisions in the OCP on growth. But then separate to that process, we would, it could, I suppose, happen in tandem as long as the projects were well coordinated. I couldn't say.
Sorry, what was the question, Ms. Burns?
My question was likely not integrated within an official community plan, but could happen alongside.
And I can further comment, sort of tying your comments together, Councilor Kelly and Councilor Nixon's comments together, that the official community plan could also inform the future land use or the land use for one neighborhood.
Right. Thank you. Which actually sort of leads me to a question of one of the points that you raised, Ms. Anderson, and that was, you said that the DCC bylaw should be updated regularly, but how often is regularly in your mind? What is a review schedule, appropriate review schedule?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I would suggest every 5 years would be sort of the recommended review schedule with potentially some minor updates even in between, if things are changing. If you did adopt an OCP that changed your future land use growth areas and you needed to anticipate those projects, you might want to do it more frequently. But I would say if you're doing it every 5 years, you're in good shape. And again, I really recommend those inflationary annual reviews, which are quite a simple process, and there's sort of a guidelines attached to that, and then you get yourself out of, especially in these last few years, there's been such incredible construction cost increases that essentially the municipality is like leaving money on the table if you're not doing that.
Thank you very much. And it sort of leads me to another question. And you'll forgive me for this, Ms. Anderson, because this is nothing if not complex. But when you talked about the community assist factor, and so regardless of whether it was 1% or 25%, it's all water projects developed in the community that pay into that. Is that correct?
So the assist factor has to be the same for the different categories. So if we're talking about water, the municipality could have an assist factor of 25%, but then you're essentially utilizing, for simplicity, like taxation or general revenues to pay that 25%. So you're essentially subsidizing future growth by 25%.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. Thank you very much. Councilor McCann.
Thank you, Your Worship. Along that line, when discussing the municipal assist levels, other than categorization, such as whether it's water or roads or whatever, what about alternative types of development? Would it be appropriate to have different municipal assist levels for projects that are going to be heavy on multifamily versus projects that are heavily on single family? Is that typical? Is there precedence for that in other communities where we would have different levels?
Through the mayor, basically this is factors on the category, not the type, but there's different DCCs for different types of development. So, municipalities might, so for example, they have different rates. And generally speaking, like when you have multifamily development, the DCC rates are much lower than a single detached dwelling, because you're essentially, in a way, it's another way of pooling funds. They tend to be more efficient development, and you have more people paying a share. So generally, single detached housing has like a very high DCC, and as you go into multifamily, they have lower DCCs. Some municipalities, there's different approaches to that. Some of them are by size, like square meters. So if you have they have small units, there's smaller or less DCCs. Some of them are by just type, like an apartment, whether it's 2,000 square feet or 900 square feet pays the same amount. And some of them have a sliding scale. So there's different philosophies on that, but that's generally how you kind of create I think the cost differentials that you're talking about.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman?
Thank you, Mayor Logan. Just curious about, maybe staff can comment on this, my question. What about parcel tax for this? Would this be eligible for parcel tax?
Yeah, I think that was, if I understood Ms. Henderson correctly, it was the local service area.
Yeah.
Was one of the potential
I missed that.
financing models.
That's too bad.
And I wanted to ask as well, and this is for staff, so not within the Montaigne proper, but adjacent, there is a multifamily zoned parcel. And I'm curious, is its water supply at risk, given the current build out of Montaigne and pressures? Is there any risk to the development of that parcel, given water availability and pressure?
Your worship, part of, I think I can answer that, at least lead you down the right road to, part of that development, multifamily development and any multifamily development for that matter, or multi-lot subdivision, we have our consultants generally at the cost of the developer run the modeling on that. So I can't say whether it would be at jeopardy or it would be fine or not, but as development proposals come through for that piece of land, they would run the modeling and that would tell us that gives that answer.
Okay, so that would be, were somebody to come forward, that would be something we'd look at in advance before we.
That's good. Yeah. And the other question to that is if elevations and pressures are an issue there as well, never mind what the right and what's not.
Yeah.
Is that property at an elevation that is not serving the right amount of fire flows for that,
right,
for the desired build. So again, the model does take that into account.
And on that note, sorry, Councilor Kelly, if, for example, that were to be developed, is there something that could be done for fire flows, for example, locally, immediately for that parcel, such that it could be developed, and without the reservoir, for example?
Yeah, Your Worship, I'm not necessarily in a position to give an exact answer to that, because I'm not an engineer, but I think that certain things could be done. I mean, it depends on how much money you want to throw at it.
Yeah, fair. Mr. Hudson, you have comments?
You could start looking at booster stations and those types of engineering approaches.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Kelly.
Thanks, Your Worship. Your Worship, through to staff, I'm just curious, and maybe this is a silly question, but how did we get to the dollar figure if we're not sure of the size and capacity of the reservoir?
This, through Mayor to Council, this came through their Montaigne's consultant to us. It was part of their request, which triggered us contacting Ms. Henderson and Urban Systems on our behalf.
Thank you.
If I can, it is an important note. This is not our dollar figure. It is not our class estimate. We can't attest to its accuracy or reliability.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, Councilor McCaskill?
One last question, Your Worship, not so much specific to this project, but philosophical question with regards to Ms. Henderson's comments on good versus bad DCCs. And this is not at all related to an item that may come further in the agenda. But I'm wondering, even though infrastructure deficiencies were identified as something that's not necessarily, it falls under the bad use of DCCs category, what about the case where infrastructure is deficient but growth is desired in that particular area? So you have an area that's been sized for X number of units and now it's being revisited and rezoned by the communities for increased densification and so on. Is that appropriate uses for DCCs? And I recognize it's more of a philosophical question than anything.
Ms. Henderson, could you shed any light on that?
Sure, and that's through the mayor in terms of the answer to that question, which I think many municipalities are dealing with now, especially as more complete community or downtown redevelopment is encouraged. So basically those deficiencies in the system should be paid by the taxpayer. And so this comes back to that benefit allocation piece, is that you might have, it's needed for growth, but there might be a percentage of that project that's paid for out of the tax base. So that's part of the comprehensive DCC review process, is you identify all those projects that are needed, and then you do basically a detailed technical analysis to determine who the benefiting factors are. And there's sort of sometimes you could say, you know what, we wouldn't be doing this unless it was growth, in which case it could be allocated 100% to growth. But if this is something that you have a current deficiency in, you know, quite often there'll be a portion of that that could be benefited to the existing development. And that's just part of the review process.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Well, thank you, Ms. Henderson. That was, oh, sorry, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, actually, just kind of formulating in a second here. Were we to go through with something like a local service area and borrow that money and then recover it in the future through taxes, how much would that harm our ability to borrow for other projects, as we're tapped for that, I believe, correct?
Yeah, I don't know if Deputy Director Cook can speak to that.
Kind of a question for Brent, I suppose, but.
Yeah, I apologize, Councillor, I don't know that I can answer that, but I can come back to you with that question at a later date.
Yeah, please do.
Okay.
Please do. Feel free to email me.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, Ms. Henderson. That was very informative. Very much appreciate the presentation and the memo.
Thank you for having me.
Good presentation.
Thank you.
And thank you, staff, for all your input on that as well. That was really interesting. Okay. We'll now move on to item 7.2, R1B Single Detached Plus Residential Zone. A report from our manager of planning, Mr. Simile.
Thank you, Worship. Keith Fugate. This report, I don't have a slideshow, I just wanted to sort of open up a discussion with council and summarize the report. So back on April 25th this year, council directed staff to bring back a report to look at the plan to consolidate single-family residential, which is R1 zone, and our single-detached plus residential, R1B zone together. We interpreted that as essentially, can we look at a blanket rezoning that would allow for single-detached dwelling units in all of the single-family zone areas. So we looked into this, and again, high-level report. There are some obvious benefits with this. Overall benefit is that if that R1B zone is common across all single-family zones, it could increase the long-term rental fabric, and that would help alleviate the housing crisis. So that would be the end goal, the greatest part of that. So given that part of Fernie is in a floodplain and part of Fernie is on a slope and very little of Fernie is in a flat non-floodplain area, R1B actually works really well in a floodplain area. So that's one benefit. So the annex for the Mountain View subdivisions, for example, which are predominantly zoned R1 right now as far as single family, there's a bit of a limitation there as far as being able to do basement suites, because you can't build a basement suite below flood construction over the floodplain. So if everything were zoned R1B, it would allow you to do a detached dwelling unit above the floodplain, like we see commonly above a garage. You could also do like a cottage that is up to flood construction level as well. Another benefit is just the ease of development. For a lot of the developed neighborhoods, a single family home is sitting on those without a suite in it. So putting a suite in could be a pretty big cost, or not even physically able to do just because of the layout of the home and where everything and how it's configured. So again, if the yard has space, then putting that cottage or that garage suite behind that is much easier. And also, thirdly, it gives us more housing options. So right now, R1 allows for suites. R1B allows for detached or attached single family or accessory dwelling units. So you can do a suite or detached dwelling unit with that. Not listed in the staff report and also worth noting as a benefit is similar to what we see with our delegation bylaw. If we do a blanket rezoning, then those rezonings that council sees 3-4 times a year are no longer coming to council. We do one amendment, and that's using staff time and council time as well. And then also making it easier to develop through for the developers as well and the property owners. There were some challenges. These aren't necessarily showstoppers, but the things I think that need to be investigated prior to just moving forward with an R1B blanket rezoning. The first one, and Councilor McCaskill touched on this earlier, is the servicing issue locally, neighborhood by neighborhood, and overall. And our sewer system is a good example of that. So it's really worth noting that the R1B zone right now has the exact same density as the R1 zone. So the overall density wouldn't be increasing if we were to, or the overall potential density wouldn't be increasing if we were to do a blanket rezoning. But we may see an increased uptake in R1 rezonings for the reasons I stated earlier, that it's just easier to develop a detached unit in some areas. So you may see people that didn't want to or couldn't develop a suite now developing single detached dwelling units. So that increase in unit count could result in stress on our system, and we just need to sort of know what our system can handle before we move forward with our R1B rezoning. And again, when I say system, I mean both locally and overall. Secondly, parking and snow removal. Again, we need to look at how people park in our neighborhoods. In the Annex and Maintown are prime examples where there's a lot of older homes built. Some homes don't have driveways, a lot of homes don't have driveways, the home's closer to the front property line. Ironically, when a home is closer to the front property line, it's much easier to build a suite in the backyard because there's a bigger backyard. But when parking is accessed from a lane, we typically don't plow residential lanes. And in some cases, even if residential lanes could either be plowed by us or by a contractor, there's the potential that the water line is quite close to the surface, and driving on them regularly drives frost down into there and freezes the water lines. And we've seen that in the past. Thirdly is neighborhood concerns. I'm not saying there are neighborhood concerns. I mean, we pretty commonly do R1B rezonings, and sometimes we get some feedback, and we're always welcome to that feedback. But I think if we're doing an overall rezoning, we should probably talk to the neighborhoods, talk to people that live there, get a feel for sort of that overall fabric of the community and move forward based on that. And that wouldn't necessarily kill an R1B blanket rezoning, but it might help us to mold the language in the bylaw for setbacks, heights, things like that help to minimize the neighborhood impact. And lastly, provincial housing plan. So in April, the province did announce the Stronger BC Homes for People plan, and we still don't know everything we don't know the details on that, and that's coming forward in the fall. So I think that it's worth hearing from the province, seeing what they're going to do with that. This R1B rezoning could be taken care of through that plan. We don't know that yet, so just really taking that in. So really, in conclusion, I think that the best course forward here is to, one, wait for the province and see what they have to say, and two, if we do move forward with an R1B blanket rezoning, as we're moving forward with an OCP process here coming up in the near future, it gives us a really good opportunity to poll the community, and we have to do early and ongoing consultation with the community as part of the official community plan process. So we have a really good opportunity to sort of bring this forward as part of that official community plan and bring language into the OCP, and then that could help to move forward with a zoning amendment. So that's a very brief summary, but I'm more than happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Simley. Councillor Kelly.
Thanks, Your Worship. Where are we at, or are we getting any kind of a handle on what kind of increased capacity our systems can tolerate?
Through Mayor and Council, I don't think we're there yet. We're still at the sampling for a year, and then we start designing our system based on what the river can handle and back from that. So the answer is kind of no, we're not there yet.
Thank you.
Other questions?
There's always a chance I was gonna put my hand up there.
Always.
Thank you, Worship. Thanks to staff for just an excellent high-level look at this particular request. I really appreciate it. The comment that I want to make with regards to specifically the challenges that are presented is that all of these challenges are present now anyway, because at any point, anyone with R1 could be coming to council and requesting a rezoning to R1B immediately, right? So each request, whether it's infrastructure shortage or parking or snow removal issues and so on, they're all ever present. So really not having blanket R1B simply just adds a couple months to the process. There's no, I guess, let me restate my comment as a question. If there isn't a zoning change required, if someone has R1B zoning and they want to build a secondary suite, but our infrastructure won't support it, we can literally look at the back alley and say, not one more suite could be added on here, we're at the limit. Do we have the ability to restrict them from building it?
Your Worship, through the council, I don't believe we have that ability. I think once it's zoned, and if someone were to propose it, it would move forward, no different than a multifamily or more subdivisions.
Look, at the building permit level, we don't have the ability to say, sorry, you can't add another building or another dwelling unit or another suite here because there's no more capacity in the system.
I would like to come back with an answer, but I don't think there's anything that would say that you can't develop it. Since it's already zoned for it, you can't develop it. And I mean, in theory, your question rings true for all of the R1 and all of the R1 zone, because someone could propose a basement suite and have the same situation, right?
Yeah, well,
so in that circumstance, it would be our responsibility to potentially upgrade the service to support.
Yeah, Your Worship, I'm not sure whose responsibility it is, and this dovetails into the BCC talk again, where we can't use BCCs for this type of thing. I have to look into that to get you an answer. I mean, I don't think we're in the situation where one suite is going to completely back up the sewer system for everyone else. I don't think we're there. I think we've heard that before from neighborhood concerns in past reports, previous councils. But I don't think that was really a concern. It was more of a concern than a legitimate thing. But I don't think that we're in that situation.
Further follow-up, yes, thank you. Yes, and I can recall multiple occasions where R1B rezoning was requested where that particular concern was brought up and where staff repeatedly advised council that, in fact, it was unlikely that the system was going to be radically degraded or affected by adding, changing the zoning of one lot or another one. So that I guess that is why I'm kind of wondering why that's not true, even if they're all R1B.
Yeah.
Since everyone has the potential to do it, and we can't actually stop them from building suites and adding people anyway, then what's the actual limitation then? With the sole exception, by the way, of the provincial one. I recognize that there's a potential redundancy issue, and I also recognize that moving into the OCP is the perfect time to ask the community about this, as opposed to rushing headlong into it. But I'm not sure if I see the distinction with the other potential challenges other than, as distinct from what we have today.
Yeah, Your Worship, through to Councilor McIsaac, if I can comment on that, I would say that, again, the density is the same between the two zones. We may see an uptick in R1B building permits that we don't see now because, I don't have to rezone it, we just build sweep. We may see that. But I think that the main thing, just to, I guess, sort of rephrase the staff report a little bit, is I think it's important to harmonize this, looking at this R1B rezoning and any sort of upzoning in Fernie with the liquid waste management plan, what's happening there. So I think it's important to know everything that's happening before we really do move forward, and just probably best practice to do so. But you bring up a really good point that, you know, if you can already do it anyways, apply for it tomorrow would probably get approved. And if everyone were to do it, and everyone were to get approved, what's the difference in just doing it now? So you bring up a good point, but I think that making sure that we're all in alignment with all of the studies that are happening right now is also important.
Thank you. I don't think I could have summarized that better myself at the end there. But it does bring up the point, Your Worship, that in the midst, no, not even in the midst, we've long been in a housing crisis, and it's unlikely to wane anytime soon. Not having the information about the capacity for a system, not having our the ability to expand it, is considerably hampering our ability to create more livable space in the community.
I would agree. Councilor Shoesmith, do you have a question?
No. Thank you.
Ms. Janice had her hand up, and then Councilor Nixon.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just to clarify, we do have significant reports and modeling, so we do have a fairly good understanding of our infrastructure capacity for the existing development, and have looked at in the 2020 Integrated Infrastructure Capital Plan project at future growth potentials, and relatively, albeit at a smaller time period, not projected, because we didn't have enough of the information to look at a 25-year build out. But certainly there is a good baseline information, amount of information that just needs to be brought into these different projects.
Yeah, and if I can take off on that, I would say that using that information as part of this analysis is important. So just to sort of take that one step further as to what the comments were, that we don't know enough. If we do know enough, if we have that information, we need to apply it in our analysis and our recommendations moving forward with the council. And that's one of those things that sort of takes time as part of the process.
Thank you. Councilor Nixon.
Thank you, Mayor Morgan. Milligan, stumbled over my words there. So let's say we're July 2024 and we're still waiting for the government's plan, which could potentially happen.
Yeah.
Just curious, what would be the timeline on putting in this blanket R1B, like R1 to R1B? Like what would be how long would it take us to go forward with this plan?
Yeah, Your Worship, through to Councilor Nixon, I think that if there is no announcement from the province and we do decide to potentially move forward, I think again, part of that OCP process to sort of gauge the neighborhood is the gateway to that.
Mm-hmm.
So part of that OCP process, and it may be a situation where we've got everyone in the room, we can sort of do a vibe poll of people to sort of decide whether we should move forward with R1B separately from the OCP. And rather than, it has to be part of the OCP. Like, we don't necessarily have to adopt it in the OCP then move forward, but we can use that OCP public consultation period and sort of double down and piggyback on it to give us the information we need. So, I mean, long term, I would say once the OCP is adopted, but if we want to move forward with it sooner than that, and we would still want to use that OCP public consultation period, we could take the information and branch off from the OCP adoption to move forward with the R1B.
Okay.
Councilor McIsaac.
No, thank you, Worship. Just to go back to what Director Jansen said, with regards to the modeling information and so on that we have, are we at the level where we can say we have capacity to add 100 more dwelling units, or 50 more, or 1,000 more? Like, do we have that level of granularity of knowledge?
I would defer to the engineering team on that. My level of detail is around the actual infrastructure, like where those gaps and risks are. But in terms of those, I'd have to dig into those reports.
Yeah, we wouldn't be able to answer that tonight, we'd have to come back.
No,
Fair.
And of course, the other question to council, and it's something that staff would have to look at, is if there are X number of units that we can potentially fit in our system, how do we want to spend those units? Do we want to spend them on R1B units potentially, or do we want to focus on multi-family units in part of it and sort of that? So like that's all part of the questions that need to be asked, and that should be out of the engineering.
I'm curious, sorry, Mr. Snowling, just reflecting on an earlier question from Councillor McIsaac, and just help me understand, and forgive me if I misunderstood something, but currently, if an area is zoned R1 and we're doing this project by project rezoning R1B, the rezoning is still a tool we have at hand to use if, for example, we came across an area or a neighborhood or a block that we had significant concerns about their service, their infrastructure. We could refuse it on those grounds. It still is a tool available to us.
Yes, Your Worship, it is a tool, and further to that, if we get an R1B application, there's, I mean, it has to go to council right now, but there's certain ways that we can handle it as well. I mean, along with the announcement to delegate development variance, the province also armed local governments with the ability to waive public hearings if that application is consistent with the OCP. So I mean, even in the interim, we could potentially look at something like that. I'm not at all putting a recommendation or motion on the table, but there are things in our toolbox that we can move forward with in the interim as well.
No, I appreciate the conversation because it's important that we around the council table understand the tools at our disposal.
And I should also add, just sort of Councillor Nixon's comment earlier on how else we can move forward. I mean, we could decide to not use the OCP process as part of this and just move forward with it as a separate project as well.
Sure. Yeah. Sorry, it was Councillor Shoesmith first, and then Councillor Arnick.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through Your Worship to staff. It feels to me as if this conversation constantly turns around back to questions around capacity. And it sounds like we have the information at hand, we just haven't done the analysis. It's my feeling that having this discussion and perhaps committing to providing something to people that we can't actually provide or we don't know if we can provide is probably not the best exercise until we have an actual number, we have a better handle on this. Personally, I would like to know exactly how close we are to that capacity line in those areas before we proceed.
Mr. Baranowski.
Thank you, Your Worship. Ms. Jensen asked me to provide a bit of clarification here, and I think she has a point or raised a point that is important to note, and it's that we have a schedule in our OCP from 2014, thank you, that does identify housing capacity in specific growth areas throughout the community. That schedule would need to be updated inside our new OCP update with our new modeling, and so as we look at, and so that should provide a better view into it. And then we have to look at our overall capacity of our overall wastewater system, capacity of our overall water system. But in terms of the linear assets in the growth areas, we can update that modeling, and it is a schedule in the OCP. So those growth area models are what we will be updating specifically alongside the larger projects.
Right. It is worth noting, thank you, Mr. Baranowski, it is worth noting though that the density right now would be the same.
Yeah.
Regardless of what the OCP says, R1 density is the same as R1B density. Yeah. So it
changes nothing.
Further?
Yeah, definitely, notwithstanding what Director Lennox just said there, but, sorry, jeez, we're into the office. Sorry, I don't want to be assaulted more.
It's fine.
It sounds to me like if we're zoning something, we're not in a position to tell people that, no, we can't provide the service to this lot. So does that put us in some legal hot water where people who own a lot that is zoned for a higher density than they've developed, can they come after us if they can't develop due to our lack of capacity? Is that, like, what happens there if we've exceeded that? Like, how does that play out?
Well, it circles back to my question about, are we then obligated to provide the services required?
Exactly, and are we subject to, penalties perhaps?
Yeah, there are, if I can, your worship,
Yeah,
there are considerations, including with like development permit areas for the protection of health and safety, as well as water conservation. If council would like a memo on that, I would just request a week or so for me to pull relevant information along with colleagues and provide that to council. I think that that's a good topic on briefing, is what are your tools when capacity is constrained to manage or limit growth as a result of those constraints versus allowing development in pre-zoned areas.
Please, Councillor Audie.
Thanks, Your Worship. Through to staff, I just wanted to dig a little deeper into Director Johnson's saying we know where the gaps are. Are we talking about like inflow and infiltration, that kind of gaps, like, or just lack of? Could you sort of elaborate a little about we know where the gaps are?
Yeah, through your worship to Councillor Adia Kelly, I would pass off to Engineer Line or Director Heisler, but from a high level perspective, our 2020 report looked at risk, functionality, and capacity, and so then it identified across our water, wastewater, roads, and stormwater network, which stormwater network had limited data at the time, and our engineering team is also working to update those models with more current information. But at the time, it gave us a good sense of where our risks are in the existing development for our linear assets and where our capacity challenges and functionality are at risk currently and into a projected scenario.
Thank you. Further?
Yeah, are those reports, were they in our budget?
Thank you. Through your worship, Councillor Fernie, I did print a copy for you, and everybody did get them during council orientation.
Thank you. I'll give you one.
They are also available on our website, and I'm happy to connect the group with where that is.
Thanks, Director Johnson.
Any further questions? Councillor Susan.
Thanks for an excellent report. It was actually pretty good.
You're welcome. That's my team and I worked hard on it. It's very brief, but thank you.
Brief but informative. Thank you.
If I may, Your Worship.
Yeah, please.
There was a direction given to CAO Baroneski, and to make it an official direction, we're suggesting that there should be a resolution done for it. And so I've actually just put into a chat for all panelists to see, and I can read out the recommendation for direction. That committee, the committee of the whole request a memo from staff clarifying tools to manage growth should servicing capacity be of concern. Such that it's a clear direction for staff to do the work.
Okay, moved by Councillor Hamilton, seconded by Councillor Audie Kelly. Any further discussion? All in favor? That's unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for the offer, Mr. Baroneski. That would be helpful. With that, we'll move on to staying with Mr. Similini, item 7.4, the request from the Royal Canadian, Liquor Control. What is the LCRB? Liquor Control.
Liquor and Cannabis
Regulation Board. Thank you.
Thank you, Worship. I'm just wondering if, I think I have another report before that.
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah.
It's all good.
It's the Mr. Similini show.
It really is. Deliver them in whatever order you like.
Mix it up a little.
Thanks, Worship. We're trying something a little new here. We're bringing forward a memo to council to discuss sort of the building permits that we've seen and the development permits and things that we've seen over the last few quarters. What I'd like to do is make this quarterly report. So it's just so happened that July took in the first 6 months of the year, so we were able to do the first 2 quarters. I do want to use this as sort of a little bit of a workshop. I'll sort of present the report here and we can discuss the numbers. But I do want council to have some input on what they'd like to see in these briefings moving forward, so we can sort of customize the reports and customize our building officials reports to sort of suit what questions council might be asked out in the public. So this, again, is a look at our building permits and from the building official side, as well as the development permit type applications we received from the planning side. I'll start with saying that the average time to process a building permit application is still around 6 to 8 weeks. Now that the caveat to that, if the permit application is complete. So a complete building permit application, something that doesn't need to go back and forth with the applicant over however long.
Thank you, Worship. I apologize. This is a confusing statement for me because it says the average time to process is currently a minimum of, but typically an average is an average.
That is
so is it?
Your skin is crawling right now.
Yeah.
So let's cross out the word minimum.
Okay. Thank you.
and to make it grammatically correct, we'll cross out the word and of.
Marvelous. Thank you.
So that being said, the permit application is complete, that's the timeline. However, what we're seeing is only about 1 out of every 10 permit applications are complete. So what's happening is every incomplete application compounds and causes more review time for every other application in the queue. We're working on that. Again, I think that there's sort of a both sides where we can complain about receiving incomplete applications, but the information that is out there for an applicant to actually know if their application is complete or not isn't necessarily there. So I don't want to dive too far into the LGDAP stuff. I can bring I'm planning on bringing an update to council on that at a future meeting. But that work hopefully is going to help us move forward with reaching out to the community and letting them know what a complete application is. So hopefully that results in receiving those applications complete. And as we receive more and more complete applications, if we can get to 9 or 10 out of 10, I'm hoping that 6 to 8 week timeline will drop off so that we can issue permits a lot quicker. So into the numbers, from January to June of this year, we issued 38 building permits in Q1, 33 in Q2 for a total of 71. Plumbing permits, grand total of 25. Solid fuel burning appliance permits, grand total of 12. And demolition permits, grand total of 7 for 115 total permits from our building officials. It's also worth noting that we talk about, these were permit applications received. I misspoke to say permits issued, I misspoke. This is for applications received. So some of these have been issued, some of them are still working forward. So if you notice, if you notice a discrepancy in the building officials report that said permits issued, this number is permits received. So it's a little bit of a different stat there. It is really worth noting too that of these 115 permit applications that we get, each one of them requires, in some cases, several or more inspections. So our building officials aren't just reviewing and issuing permits and then that's it. There's a process in here. And also what we're seeing in line with receiving incomplete applications is also many failed inspections where the building official doesn't pass an inspection, and then has to go do that same inspection again. So again, once the information is out there and once those inspections start passing more and more commonly, it's going to reduce the amount of time that our building officials need to spend on each individual permit and reduce the amount of time that it takes to issue permits and do those inspections. So of those numbers, we had 16 single-family dwellings in the first half of the year, 3 secondary dwelling units or secondary suites, and 8 multifamily dwelling units. So these aren't necessarily, again, in line with the permit numbers because one permit could be 8 units in a townhome project. So, but those are the dwelling units that were created. We are a little bit behind, or we're not seeing quite as much money or permit numbers as in 2022. So this year we've issued 49 permits compared to 65 the same time last year, so 16 more permits last year. But taken context, I mean, it would be a much more in-depth analysis to actually say, what were those permits for? I mean, maybe there was still only 16 single-family dwellings, and most of those 16 permits were simple building permits for decks or something like that. So,
Thanks, Your Worship. Just wondering, is the drop-off rate in 2022 also similar to 2023? As in, out of 10 applications, only one were complete, roughly?
Your Worship, through to Councillor Ramirez, I would say it's about the same. We've been sort of that same level of receiving a complete application.
Yeah, Your Worship, thank you. So essentially, it's just the number of applicants have been fewer. Would that be a fair assessment?
The number of applications coming through the door has been fewer.
fewer.
That's correct.
I'm sorry, Mr. Simley, anecdotally, have you had any conversation with your peers in sister communities? Is that true in other communities as well, the drop off the number? Because again, anecdotally, I can't remember the number. It appears to be the case in the RDK as a whole, where the numbers are quite.
Yeah, Your Worship, that's a great point. I haven't had the discussion. It would also be interesting to see what the amount of permits are in comparison per capita too. I mean, how many permits does Farler Alfred process for how many people live there versus how many people live in Fernie? Or are we processing more per capita, less per capita? Is the drop off similar? I can't even comment on why it has dropped off necessarily, and by the end of the year it may not have. Maybe we see an uptick in July, August, September. So, but I haven't had that discussion. But if that's something that you want us to bring forward in the future, we can reach out.
Well, just curious. I can certainly bring the numbers from the RDK if they report them every meeting. Councilman Cudd.
Just to follow up your question, Your Worship, province-wide, single-family dwelling starts are down 30%.
Perfect. Thank you.
Your Worship, again, as a follow-up to your comment that, again, I'm not suggesting how to do planning work, that's not my domain, but it's not a policy question also, but I'm just saying like having that kind of information will actually help them to understand, what are the reasons for some of the drop-off rates. If there are like 2 or 3 reasons that are like contributing 80% of the drop-off rates, probably we can think of ways in which we can alleviate them.
Yeah, good numbers to have to get an understanding of where things are headed.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. So that brings us to the development permits. It says development permits here, but we'll class development permits as variances, development permits, hazard lands development permits, as well as any other permit applications we get, sign permit applications, subdivisions, bylaw amendments, and water course permits. So DDPs, we had 22. Again, we had received an application right when we were writing the report, so it says 22 in the table and then 23 down below, so we'll stay at 22 for the purposes of this. Development permits 12, hazard lands development permits 33. That number's quite high. As I noted when I did my earlier presentation, essentially half of Fernie is in the floodplain and half of Fernie is in a sloped area. So a lot of those building permits that come forward either require a floodplain hazard lands development permit or a slope hazard lands development permit. So a lot of the building permits actually have a hazard lands development permit accompanied with them. Sign permits, we had 7. Subdivision application 6. Bylaw amendments 4, and we did not do any water course protection development permits so far this year. That's water course protection development permits are if somebody wants to build within 15 or 30 meters of a stream or river, depending on our water body, depending on where it is. Those aren't very common. Generally, I mean, we're on, for example, we're on hazard lands development permit number 400 something, and we're on water course protection development permit number like 30 something. So we just don't see that. So the first half of this year saw a total of 84 permits coming from the planning side. Worth noting, I just wanted to follow up that of the 22 development variance permits issued in the first 2 quarters of this year, 19 of those were minor variances through the development variance permit delegation bylaw. And that has saved around 247 staff hours total. And again, brings the timelines down from around 6 to 8 weeks down to 1 to 2 weeks in some cases. Some cases a little bit more, because it's really worth noting that we can still do delegated development variance permits for bigger developments. But they obviously go under a little bit more of a scrutinous reviews, we don't see them as often. I think overall with our as I presented at LGMA, overall, we've seen over 300 hours of city staff time since we've adopted that delegation model, so it's a good thing. So just in conclusion, I just wanted to reach out to council and see if there's any stats that they want to, and again, this doesn't necessarily have to come from this meeting. If you have anything you want to see in these reports, feel free to email me and we can try to put together a memo. I'm thinking that given the amount of work that goes into these reports, it does take a little bit of time. I don't know if it's worth bringing forward every month, or if you'd rather see it more on a quarterly basis. We can still bring forward the monthly building officials reports that you see attached to this every month, so it's just sort of the numbers, but then a little bit of analysis or summary on those numbers, I think is well to come forward quarterly, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, certainly with the council for other opinions, I think quarterly is fine. Actually, and if you're collecting the building officials report anyway, if that came monthly as a snapshot, that would be untoward.
And I should add that the building officials reports, they've been in the same format for quite a while, and I can look at, we have been sort of chatting, it's more of a capacity thing than anything, but sort of reinvigorating these and making them a little bit more friendly to the eye and easier to read. And it's just redoing a spreadsheet and moving forward with that, especially when we have our local government development approvals grant thing happening, and these are going to change anyways. Again, we just haven't spent the capacity on that with how fast things are moving on the other side.
Thank you.
Worship staff, I definitely found this well presented and concise. It was very easy to parse the information. So as it stands, it's pretty great. Thank you.
Thanks, Your Worship. Again, agreed. Well done. It's a good report. Useful for us. Once a quarter is the right time frame for this. If there's any one thing, Manager Similarly, that might actually help us is in a quarterly report. If you also could bring to the council if there was any kind of improvement work that was done, just in terms of processing itself, that might be pretty insightful. Numbers go up, numbers go down, sure, but are there any fundamental changes in the process itself that the staff has come up with? That would be an excellent input.
Sure, so I guess this report right now sort of has a short-term planning focus in that it looks at the applications we receive, but a little bit of a section on more of the long-term planning stuff that we've done in the last quarter, or the last quarter could be helpful as well.
Exactly,
okay.
That's what I was thinking.
Thank you, Worship. Just to speak a little bit to what Councillor Ramadas is saying, although I appreciate the report and I do think quarterly is more than adequate for it, I'm less interested in the specific numbers of the number of permits and so on taken out than I am in what policies this council is putting forward that affect that number. So in that particular case, things like the local government development approval, the implementation and the follow-up of that, of how that actually affects the permitting process, whether it is actually lowering the minimum average time or not. That's the thing that I'm looking for to see highlighted in the report. And the individual numbers are interesting because it's useful to sort of see what the trends are. But from a policy perspective, that's where I'm looking, is where can we actually have an impact on it? So if there are things that can be highlighted within that, that's what I'm interested in.
And further to that, the resulting number of, maybe the resulting number of affordable dwelling units or something that are being built as a result of the policies that we're putting.
Absolutely. Thank you.
I think it is kind of a further to Councilor McIsaac's point there, and Councilor Ramadas' point is, if there's some comparables, like with other communities, so that we can see if, okay, it's great that we spit up XYZ process, but what if someone down the street has done it 2x or 3x of what we've done, to just kind of see how things are improving relative to the rest of the region.
And I guess sort of jumping off of that, it's similar to the comment that was made earlier about just talking to other communities and seeing where they're at, getting those baseline numbers, but learning what they're doing and what they're having success with could very well guide us forward with where we move in the future. Sort of why reinvent the wheel type thing.
Yeah. Good. Councilor Kelly.
I just wanted to ask if your worship through to Manager Silly, the LGDAP, you mentioned bringing it forward to a future meeting. Do we have a timeframe?
Your worship, through Councilor Kelly, I think that I would like to potentially bring it forward to the September committee meeting, maybe the October one. It's a little bit late for August. What I can tell you now is that the project has been granted an extension through to December, and the main reason for that is the announcement that the government is going forward with in the fall. So we requested the extension, just said that, the project is, I'm really happy with the project, just full disclosure, I'm really excited about where it's headed. We just said that in order for this to be a real success, we're a little bit rushed to get it done by August, and then if we do a whole bunch of work by August, then the province comes in and says something that completely undoes everything we did. So we just want to make sure that province's announcement, if they do make it in the fall, is taken into consideration before the final product is presented. So,
yeah, fair. And but to Councillor Nixon's earlier comment, if we're still waiting for that in July of 2024, let's not wait that.
And in this case, the deadline for us is December regardless, right? The final reporting is by December. I think that the consultant has noted that they'd like to have everything kind of wrapped up by October.
Yeah.
But December gives us a little bit more of a buffer. But that's just a really brief analysis of that. I can bring forward some specifics as far as what's been delivered and things like that at that meeting in September, October.
Thanks. It's good to hear that you're pleased with it. And I was just harkening back to the comment about the best practices piece. I would imagine that McElhaney is looking at those types of things.
That absolutely are. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Milligan. Just a off-the-cuff question, just in relation to the planning world, and I was listening to CBC the other day, and they're talking about the chatbot for planning and development. Do you know anything about that, Manager Sullivan?
Yeah, Your Worship, through Councilor Nixon, it actually has been discussed at in my meetings with McElhaney as potential. We have to be careful that we sort of stay within the guidelines of what we were given money for from UBCM with the project. But I mean, I think it's Kelowna that's implementing the system. There is potential there for us, like the checklist or the guidebook that McElhaney is putting together for us. If that's more of an interactive thing using a GIS or a chatbot where I live at such and such a property, what permits do I need to build a house? And then it comes through, so it's part of it, like sort of building the database and moving through with that. What was sort of discussed is that there's potential that if we're doing one or the other, the database for both of them is very similar, GIS versus chatbots. So the information that the chatbot would pull out would be the same information that the GIS would pull out. The difference is you're clicking on a property versus asking the chatbot. I don't know a whole lot about the computer side of things, the computer science side of things, but if that were an option and we could move forward with one database, it could serve multiple functions. But again, it was very preliminary discussions we had with McElhaney, and I don't know if they're going to include that sort of, we need to do this in a final report. That being said, right now the report will tell us what we want to do, but another deliverable, a separate deliverable from that is those development checklists. So sort of call one, call two. We should have some more information on where they see the technology headed for Fernie in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Kelly.
Following up a little bit on what Councilor Nixon had said, I thought I had read that Kelowna has said if it's working for them and it's successful, that they're willing to share it gratis.
Yes, Your Worship, through Councilor Kelly, I believe that is the case. So I mean, if something is developed, that's great. So again, why reinvent the wheel? Right? And we're actually in a pretty good benefit that the McElhaney office that's working on our project is based out of Kelowna as well. So they've got their finger on the pulse.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions for Mr. Simley? Any more comments? Seeing none? Now you can go on to it.
Thank you, Worship. Very briefly, when there is a liquor license amendment or change to the liquor license request to the province, the liquor board typically sends a referral to us and gives us the ability to comment on that. It also gives us the ability, if we wish, to solicit public comment on that change. That being noted, the liquor board, if we don't decide to solicit public comment, the liquor board does do that part of the application as well. So very briefly, just our recommendation here is to leave it with the province and let them take care of soliciting public comment. Reasons for that really is this is for the Royal Canadian Legion. They were a food primary previously, they're switching to a liquor primary. The zoning that they're in allows for it. Everything lines up as far as this being permitted in that area. There aren't really any single family dwelling units next door to it or anything like that, so we just decided to recommend that we set aside our province solicit comment for John.
Just to clarify what you just said, you said they were a food primary, they wanted to do a liquor primary. My understanding is they were a club liquor primary, wanted to, just want to make sure.
Apologize, yeah, you're right.
Thank you.
Any other questions, Councilor McCall?
Move to waive the option.
Do you want to read the direction, Mr. McCall?
Certainly. The direction request is that Council waives the City of Fernie's option to hold a public consultation for the conversion of the Royal Canadian Legion liquor primary club license to a liquor primary license.
Moved by Councilor McIsaac, seconded by Councilor Audrey Kelly. Any further discussion? All in favor? Thank you. And now, Mr. Simile can rest. Moves us on to item 7.5, Council Code of Conduct Review, a report from our corporate officer, Mr. McCall.
Thank you, Your Worship. And this time I'm going to set up my screen such that I can do this. All right. If you recall, back in April, I brought forward to Council the review of the Council Code of Conduct policy, and I asked Council to make comment on it. From that, it was identified that there was a couple typographical or grammar issues that certainly needed to be corrected, and those included the language in the summary section, which was not relevant to the policy. It was with respect to public hearings, and that document had been read by so many people. And then there was a grammar correction in paragraph 2 of the policy statement, which essentially was used the words others, so it now reads a little better, and the documents that are attached to your agenda show the red line version and the clean version. And then the other feedback, the other discussion was Council asked that language be considered which would encourage Council members to speak to matters, including if they're voicing a dissenting opinion, and to openly share their thoughts. So there's quite a lot of dialogue around that, and it was landed upon bringing something back that captured that. So what I've got on the next slide is a primary amendment, and the parts that are not underlined are already in the policy. The next statement is members should always feel encouraged to share their input toward a decision, regardless of whether they are speaking in the affirmative on the matter or voicing a dissenting opinion. And part of the reason why I was put into this section is because the previous part talks about demonstrating your ability to positively work with, influence others, and come together to lead resolution of an issue or make decisions based on common ground. But again, in that one, it's saying let's go to a common ground, which might seem to quell dissenting opinion. So in that, it was put into that spot. That's essentially the main change requested and the language that is adopted. If Council is satisfied with that language, then I would bring this back actually to August 8th for adoption. If Council is looking for further changes, I would probably then take the opportunity to make those changes and bring them back to the next committee of the whole to confirm. So that's.
Thank you, Mr. McCall.
Thank you. That's it.
Comments, questions from Council? I appreciate the language. It's not as dictatorial as this.
Might have been implied.
It was implied last time.
Autocratic, is that?
Autocratic, I think, yes, that's a much better word.
I was just gonna say I would move the recommendation or the direction.
so that this would come back to, the direction would be that this be brought back to regular meeting for adoption.
Moved by Councilor Hamilton, seconded by Councilor Shoesmith. Any further discussion? All in favor? I'm guessing. That's unanimous.
Thank you, and that's my presentation.
Thank you very much, and that moves us on to correspondence. Anyone want to comment? Councilor Cousin.
Thank you, Worship. I want to comment on the letter from Prince George regarding their UBCM resolution. It's extraordinarily similar to a resolution that we've put forward at UBCM. And while I'm sure that this is a general blast out to everybody in some support for their particular resolution, I'm not sure if it wouldn't be a bad idea to send our resolution back to them, noting its similarity and requesting mutual support. I think we're trying to solve the same problem, just from with different language, which is essentially how much of the province's emergency response are we subsidizing?
Yeah, I don't disagree, except I think this one is directed at an adjacent problem, which is medical response. And I asked Chief Morgan to comment if he could, medical response, including medical response inside the community as first responder.
So a broader perspective on it than our particular individual aspects.
Ours was primarily focused on provincial highway response, or out of the community response in this one. Seemed more broadly focused on medical response, full stop. And Chief Morgan, if you're still online, I'm curious if you can provide a sense of, I don't know if you read the resolution, but medical response must be a considerable amount of your call-outs as first responders.
Your Worship, we probably are about 70% calls are medical.
Wow.
And the thing with that though is we generally have the firefighters on shift go on those, and then we call in auxiliary firefighters, not necessarily use overtime on career staff. So it is a bit of a savings there, but as far as the road rescue goes, I worked it out to about $6,900 in overtime in 22. And I think we got around 6,500 or 6,000. We'll have to check with finance on that, but around $6,000 reimbursement from the PEP.
Okay, so, and sorry, just for clarity, that's reimbursement toward overtime, but not for wages and other supplies required for the call-out.
So the reimbursement is not for wages, the reimbursement's for vehicles going out. And so they give a flat rate for however many vehicles go and attend. And then you get an extra if equipment's used, meaning rope rescue over a bank or extrication was done.
Thank you.
But we have had years where I think we were a little bit lucky last year, and I think we only had 18 highway rescues. We've had upwards of 69, so in years gone by.
Thank you. And then the Prince George resolution speaks, I think, to medical response generally by their firefighters, which would include medical response in town.
Yeah, so that's it. Yeah, so that's 100% covered by the municipality.
Okay, and yet 70% of your calls.
Yeah, but definitely between 60 and 70%. I can come back with that number for like as a definite, but over half for sure.
Yeah, well, in either event, I think it's worth supporting that resolution vis-a-vis the, if the province can participate in those costs. I think that would be helpful. It's just another example of downloading.
Yeah, I mean, it's been an issue with the chiefs for decades now, in sort of a downloading from province to municipality.
Thank you, Chief Morgan. That was very helpful. Any other comments? Councillor Robinson?
Sorry, Your Worship, I was just wondering, like, what's the reason that it's been around for decades, and what's the reason for pushback, if there is one from the province?
It's a fair question. I don't know that there is pushback from the province. Chief Morgan, maybe you can provide some context. Is this, in your experience, is this something the chiefs have gone after the province for historically, or the communities have gone after the province for historically and have met with resistance?
Yeah, so it's kind of a weird one in that I think at the UBCM and so on, they haven't really pushed the province and said, hey, we need more money. But that's definitely something that needs to be looked at. Because there's a lot, I think Cranbrook, I was just talking to Chief Scott Driver today, and they're almost doubling in already in medical call-outs due to the drug issues that have now reached Cranbrook area, which will obviously soon get to us.
Yeah, thank you. That's an important thing to flag. Thank you. Other comments? Thank you for raising it, Councillor McIsaac. On that note, thank you, Chief Morgan. On that note, we will adjourn the committee of the whole. And I wonder if we can take a 5-minute break before we convene the special meeting.
You don't have to wonder, you can just stay there.
Just looking around the room for general support.
That would be autographic. Thank you. We'll take a 5-minute break.
So good.
Thank you, and welcome back, and welcome to the special meeting of Fernie City Council held at 8:01 PM on July 18th, 2023. And once again, we acknowledge that the city of Fernie is located within Kukinamakis, the unceded traditional territory of Yakat Atnukliat. We recognize that we live and work within their vast lands. Akanahunik are from Yakat Atnukliat and are members of Tanana-speaking peoples of British Columbia, Idaho, and Montana. This meeting is being conducted by electronic means in accordance with Council Procedure Bylaw number 2446. And I'll ask for a mover and a seconder for the following recommendation, that if the communication link to the specified place for this meeting is interrupted and cannot be restored within 15 minutes, the meeting shall adjourn and reconvene to the soonest possible time that quorum can be achieved and public notice requirements met. Moved by Councillor Shoesmith, seconded by Councillor Audia Kelly. Any discussion? All in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you. Now I will ask for a mover and a seconder for the approval of the agenda. Moved by Councillor Audia Kelly, seconded by Councillor Hamilton. Any discussion? All in favor? This brings us to item number 4.1, the Mountain View Dike upgrades and Mountain McLean Drive culvert tender award. A report from project manager Ryan.
Thank you, Mayor Milton. I'll just share my screen for a very boring looking presentation, to be honest.
It's fun.
Thank you. So, hello. Today I'm here to present the tender results for the Mount View Dike upgrades and Mount McLean Drive culvert tender and the next step recommendations for this project. This project will continue the city's work to upgrade our flood protection and create a safer and more resilient community. So staff recommend awarding the full project to Galley Equipment Services to further that goal, as recommended by the city's consulting engineers, McElhaney. This would require drawing an additional $60,000, just under that, from the city's, and here I have a typo, it's supposed to be stormwater reserves. So apologies for that. A little background on this project. In 2019, the city of Fernie completed a flood mitigation plan. The Mount View Dike was identified as the third priority project in this plan. The first two priority projects have been completed since the 2019 plan. In 2020, the city undertook Mount View Dike Upgrade Phase 1 project, which extended the dike to eliminate a gap in flood protection at the downstream side of things and tie that into high ground. This project was $750,000 and was funded through a grant, the Community Emergency Preparedness Fund Structural Flood Mitigation Grant stream. Only 220 meters of dike was completed due to cost constraints, which ended the dike extension just short of McLean Drive. This year, staff feels strongly to complete that extension and also undertake the culvert upgrade. As the culvert is undersized under Mount McLean Drive and it directs Castle Creek to the Elk. This tender was put out for public tender and 2 bids were received. Only 1 bid, the Galley bid, was compliant. It was also the lowest cost bid. There are alternative options as well. Option 2 here is to go with a smaller scope of work on the project. I've been working with our consultant to determine alternatives that reduce the flood risk to the Mount View community this year. Within the available budget, we have good plans if you would like to go that way as well. And as always, council may direct staff otherwise. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lyon. Any questions?
If we were to choose option 2 as presented to the maximum bid level and the project, I mean, we don't know what that's going to leave as far as deficiencies or what extent that's going to be completed at this stage, but what does that look like potentially from a financial perspective to next year? get the rest of it done, or are like grants likely to be available, or are there grants available that would get us the rest of the way? Can you just walk us through that, please?
If I may, to council. So there's two main projects under this one project. It's the expansion of the dike, which limits our flood risk, and there is also the upgrade of the culvert. And we've been trying to, the consultants have been trying to find ways to reduce the cost of the culvert, because it has gone from an existing 700 to a 1,800, which if you think in terms of pizza sizes, that's like a small wall serves 2 people, and like an extra large serves 24. So it's like actually like quite a large thing. So working with the consultants, pizza allegories aside, there is the option to just do the dike extension, no culvert work, which would be $133,000 this year. $150,000 this year. But then we would have to come back and do the culvert, and we've been trying to see if there was lower cost ways to do the culvert. And the one that we've come up with, a cast and play structure, seems to be the lowest cost way. Previously, we'd actually bid it out in that 2020 program as like a pre-cast concrete structure that gets put in, and that was too expensive, which, you know, and it did not occur. So, and then option 2 is actually to do the extension and put the new culvert in, but do not do the cast and play structures of the upstream and downstream. So we'd still have risk of water coming back in through that culvert, just like the risk we have now, because the culvert right now does not have these cast and play structures that stop water. And that would also be within budget, and then the next year we would do the cast and play structures. Let's see. So this comes down to, unfortunately, I've had to come to council multiple times to ask for additional budget than what our projects have thought of in it should cost in the past. And it comes down to that it doesn't seem that any year it does get more cost effective. There's always grants we can try to apply for, but they are not a guarantee at this time. And we were so, staff really want to complete this project to reduce this flood risk.
Councillor Roberts?
Thank you, Worship. Does this mean the longevity will be compromised? When you said you went for another option instead of the precast option that you just suggested?
If I may, would you be able to repeat that, sorry?
Well, I'm thinking like, what's the trade-off there? Like, sure enough, you went for another option here. Does that actually have adverse effect on the longevity of the?
If I could clarify, I think you're asking, is the precast option that was dropped
That's good.
a longer life than the cast in place option?
Yeah, sorry, I had to.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering about the long-term implication of this. Yeah.
If I may, the council.
Please.
There is, no, the engineers from McElhinney who did the design do not have a concern about the longevity. Doing the precast, which was the original proposal back in 2020, there's a huge cost because these structures were so large that they needed a very large crane to come in. And that was a very high cost to get that crane in special to move that thing. So by doing cast in place, then you bring concrete trucks and you build the rebar there. So it is, there isn't that large crane and moving cost.
Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Nixon?
Thank you, Mayor Milligan. Do we have the money in the stormwater reserve?
I was given that info here.
657.
Should you use the stormwater reserve, the ending balance would be 195,018. Yes, that's 600.
Your worship, if I may, the typo is not Ms. Lyon's fault. A reserve for the water system was identified by mistake. The proper reserve for this is the stormwater reserve. The water reserve is one of our statutory reserves established in the consolidated reserve establishment bylaw. It can only be used for water capital. There is a separate stormwater reserve, its projected ending balance without this project is?
195,018.
So 195. It is not a restricted reserve or a statutory reserve, it's simply a reserve account, but it would be the appropriate reserve fund to fund this increase from it.
And if I may, that means if we took 60,000 from it, we'd have 130,000 left.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, the report identifies a significantly larger number in the water reserve.
It does. How, Your Worship and Council, apologies, the water reserve just isn't the appropriate
No,
source.
understood, no, makes sense. Just for clarity, Ms. Lyon, the Castle Creek, is it the one that comes down behind Max Turk Field there? Is that, and will this improve water disbursement from that area?
If I may, yes, part of the project will actually regrade Castle Creek. Because if you think of the Mount McLean Road, Castle Creek actually comes parallel and then makes a sharp turn, or that's what drainage design would want you to believe, and then goes through the water. So it doesn't actually do that, so part of this project would be to regrade that area to make it, Castle Creek want to go into the culvert and over into the Elgin, less so into the Max Turk fields.
So we'd have potentially less pooling on the back end of Max Turk Field?
Yes.
Excellent, thank you. Any other questions? Councilman McCarthy.
Thank you, Worship. I'd like to move option 1.
Thank you.
And recognizing that the discussion was about stormwater reserves, the resolution that's in the agenda does not identify that, so the resolution I will read out will say stormwater reserves. The council award the contract for the Mount View Dike upgrades and Mount McLean Drive culvert project to Galley Equipment Services at a project cost of $414,937.69, with the amount of $59,937.69, which is over budget funded from the storm water reserves. And that council now authorize the mayor and corporate officer to execute any necessary contract documents.
Thank you. Moved by Councilor McIsaac, seconded by Councilor Nixon. Any further discussion? All in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you.
Sorry, Your Worship.
Yes, Councilor Evans.
I just did have one question though.
Yeah.
With the consultant thing, this is a question I asked even during the roadworks on the 7th to 11th Avenue, 11th Street file that we had like a couple of weeks ago. Sorry, I might be repeating here. Like, why is the error rate so high with these guys? I'm sorry, Greg.
If I may, that's a very good question, and I would love to have a more accurate estimates to bid as well. In this case, the consultant did not provide like, here are the error bars. I could look into that, but I do not have a good answer for you.
Right.
We only did get 2 bids.
Right.
It may again be that as we tried to tender this later in the year, there wasn't as much interest. However, I would just be grasping for solutions this time.
Thank you, Ms. Lyon. I noticed the same thing, and actually remembered Councilor Ramanas's comment from the earlier conversation. Yeah, it's a sharper pencil appears to be in order. And I trust you'll provide that feedback to the consultant. Thank you. Councilman McIsaac.
Thank you, Worship. I feel like this is one of, and this is with regards to, we had this conversation with regards to moving forward with the roadworks project, but, you know, some opportunities for consolidation to create larger projects at once, which may bring more than 2 bids at a time.
Yeah.
May find us some better, sharper pencils.
Absolutely, and I think as we discussed last time, if we can consolidate some of those projects as we work through the budget process, so we can bid them early and get the better response would be very helpful. I know it's a challenge, but it's something we should look at.
Yeah.
Good, thank you. Item 5.1, the proposed letter of support, joint letter between ourselves and the Tourism Fernie in support of the Northwest Regional Mine Rescue Competition. Councillor Evans. Thank you. Seconded by Councillor.
This is a resolution to take the resolution from the table?
Is it?
Yeah, so because this was a tabled motion, we would ask that council consider removing that motion from the table.
Okay.
So then it's then present, so it's a motion to remove from the table. It's Councillor Ramadaz.
Councillor Ravenous, seconded by Councillor Audie Kelly. Any discussion? All in favor?
So now you can discuss the original motion.
We throw it on the floor.
You removed it, the chair has moved it from the table to the floor.
So the original motion then is that council provide a letter of support inviting the Northwest Regional Mine Rescue Competition to return under the new structure of society.
Sorry, that's fine. That motion's actually moved and seconded last week, so we don't need, you can just discuss the motion.
Okay, any further discussion? Councilor Nixon.
Thank you, Mayor Milligan. I was on the organizing committee for the previous one, and I just want to say that we have one of the main people in the room who actually did it. So I think she had a very good, Ms. Neal had a very good summary from that event. Is that correct? Yes. I hope everybody reads it and kind of has a look at it, because it's in previous Northwest mine rescue competitions, we had a quite a difficult time with infrastructure in the community as well, and the committee sort of used our stuff, kind of broke our stuff, and last time I think it was much better, but I hope that we can have a good agreement, just a heads up to,
thank you.
Because it's been
several years.
4 years.
Yeah.
So.
Is that summary available, Ms. Neal?
Yes, if I may, I will ensure that it is available.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Mr. Maronowski, do you have a comment?
That summary and the full review have been provided to the organizing committee as well to support it.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Just as somebody who works up there and might someday need their services, I think we should all be very proud that we have world level training and competition in that field coming back to this town, so.
Thank you.
Something we should honor. Thank you.
I will call the vote. All in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. This won't be popular. I'm going to ask for a mover and a seconder for a resolution to allow the closed meeting that we're about to enter to go past 10 p.m. Moved by Councillor Audie Kelly, seconded by Councillor Ramirez. Any discussion?
Does it have to be unanimous?
I was wondering how much sway I have.
I have a funny feeling that going past 10 might be one of those ones that needs to be unanimous.
I think it is. I think that.
Well, major, I will confirm that to you.
You could try the vote and see.
I prefer to know in advance.
It's not so easily found in my paper copy of the minutes of the meeting.
Time's good.
I apologize, Your Worship.
No,
it was not my intention to delay that.
No, it's a fair question.
It's easy.
If we make that motion, I need to take in that just a text home.
Of course.
Okay.
I'll have to look on my electronic copy, it'll be a lot faster.
Okay. This is going to take us past 10 p.m.
I was just thinking. I found it just as Mr. Boyanowski emailed it to me as well. A council meeting may continue after 10 p.m. by a motion to proceed beyond that time passed by an affirmative vote of the council members present.
Okay, thank you.
So, but it still means it have to be an affirmative vote.
Right, so we have a mover and a seconder. Any further discussion? All in favor? I knew you were gonna. Thank you. With that, we will, I'll ask for a mover and a seconder for, to close the meeting, that the meeting be closed to the public pursuant to section 90 sub 1 sub C of the community charter, as the subject matter being considered at this time relates to labor relations or other employee relations. Moved by Councillor Audie Kelly, seconded by Councillor Ramadus. Any discussion? All in favor? Thank you. We will go into close, and I thank everybody who's joined us this evening. Thank you.